I wasn't supposed to be home until Thursday. The rig at our project site north of Timmins blew a hydraulic seal at 7 in the morning, and by noon the site foreman had called a full shutdown. Equipment failure, crew, sent home, nothing to be done until parts arrived from Sudbury. I was on the Trans-Canada by 1:30 p.m., 3 hours from home, texting nobody. I wanted to surprise my fiancée. I've thought about that choice a lot since then. The choice to not send a message. The idea that I was doing something romantic. I replay it sometimes, briefly, and then I stop. Because the lesson it teaches isn't one I needed to learn. I'd been with my fiancée for 4 years. We got engaged the previous September on a hiking trail behind her parents' cottage near Bala in Muskoka. The same trail where we'd had our first proper date, rented a canoe, gotten absolutely drenched in a thunderstorm, sat under a tarp eating pre-made sandwiches from the co-op, and laughing about what a disaster the whole thing was. The ring had been her grandmother's. She cried, I cried, her father shook my hand so hard I went numb to the elbow. My best friend was going to be my best man. We'd met in first year at Queen's, end of September. In the line at the campus Tim Hortons at 7 in the morning. Both of us on 2 hours of sleep. He made a joke about the guy ahead of us, ordering a double-double with oat milk, and we'd been inseparable from that point forward. He was the person who drove 4 hours in a January blizzard when my car died on the 401 outside Kingston. He sat with me in emergency at Kingston General, when my appendix came out in second year, 6 hours in a waiting room reading magazines from 2011, just because he didn't want me to wake up alone. He'd been at my family's kitchen table more Christmases and Thanksgivings than I could count. My mother set a place for him automatically. My father talked to him about hockey and construction and interest rates. All the things he talked to me about, because, after a certain point my best friend simply was family. He'd stayed with my parents for 2 months when his own went through a brutal divorce. My mother had called him her other sons, and she meant every word of it. I pulled into my driveway at 4:52 p.m. My fiancée's car was in the garage. Normal, she finished at the rehab clinic by 4 on Tuesdays. What wasn't normal was my best friend's Subaru sitting at the curb in front of my house. I stared at it for a moment. I didn't think anything. Grabbed my bag from the back seat and went inside. The front hallway smelled like her perfume, and whatever he used for his hair, cedar and sandalwood, something he'd picked up at a shop in Kensington Market years ago. I noticed the smell without processing it. I put my bag down, hung my jacket. Then I heard the sounds from upstairs. I stood at the bottom of the staircase. The sounds were completely unmistakable. My brain processed them, and then refused to do anything with the information for what felt like a very long time. I kept waiting to be wrong. I kept waiting for some other explanation to surface. It didn't. I climbed the stairs the way I used to as a kid when I was sneaking in past curfew. Slowly, one hand on the wall, barely any weight on each step. My heart rate was steady, even and steady. I noticed that and couldn't explain it. The bedroom door was most of the way closed. I pushed it open with one finger. My fiancée saw me first. She had less than a second to understand what was happening before the color drained completely out of her face. My best friend was slower to turn. When he did, when our eyes met, I watched him understand all at once. Everything. The whole sequence of what was about to happen. He didn't look away, I'll give him that. He met my eyes and held them. You weren't supposed to be back until Thursday, my fiancée said. Her voice was barely audible. You have 10 minutes, I said. Both of you. Please. 9 minutes and 50 seconds. I walked to the closet, pulled down the large duffel bag from the top shelf, the MEC one, green and gray, I'd bought her for her birthday last year. Dropped it on the floor at the end of the bed. Start packing, I said. Then I walked out, sat down at the top of the stairs with my back against the wall, and I waited. I could hear them through the door. Her crying. His voice low and urgent, and I couldn't make out the words and didn't try. Drawers opening and closing. At one point he said my name and I said nothing. At 7 minutes I heard her say please, just let me explain, and I looked at my watch. 2 minutes, I called. They came out at 9. Her bag was barely half full, things stuffed in wrong. Her mascara had tracked down her face in 2 lines, and she was holding the bag against her chest with both arms like a shield. He was behind her, jacket on, keys in hand. He met my eyes and held them. I know there's nothing I can say, he said. Then don't. I'm sorry. I stood up, walked downstairs, and held the front door open. My fiancée stopped in front of me. She put one hand on my arm. I stepped back 1 step, no drama. And her hand fell away. She started talking. I watched the street over her shoulder and absorbed none of it. Your key, I said. Her hand was shaking when she got it off the ring. She placed it on the console table by the door. Then she walked out. My best friend paused in the doorway. You could hit me, he said. I mean it, go ahead. You'd be justified. I closed the door. I listened to both cars start and drive away. Then I went to the kitchen, made a coffee and sat down at the table. My phone started ringing at 5:45. My fiancée, I watched it ring. She called back immediately, and again. And again, by 10 o'clock she'd called 14 times. My best friend had called 9. I didn't answer a single one. I didn't block either of them. I just let the calls stack up and the notifications sit there. I wanted them to see the read receipts pile up. I wanted my best friend to understand that I was actively choosing not to respond. That was the point. He texted at 11 p.m. I know you don't want to hear from me. I just need to know you're okay. I read it and put my phone face down. He texted at 12:40 a.m. I can't sleep. I keep going over everything I've done to you. I have no excuse. I know that. I read it. At 2:17 a.m. there was a knock at my front door. Hard certain knocks. And then his voice. I know you're in there. Your lights are still on. Please open the door. I got up, went to the window in the spare room, and moved the curtain an inch. He was on my porch. Hair everywhere. Same jacket, but his hands were shaking and he'd been crying. I could see it from 2 floors up. He knocked again. I'm not leaving until you say something. One word. That's literally all I'm asking. Tell me to go to hell. Tell me anything. I stood at the window and watched him. He knocked again. He said my name. Then again. Then a third time. Each one more desperate than the one before. He sat down on my front steps and put his head in his hands, and his shoulders shook. I let the curtain fall, went back to bed. He was gone by 4. I heard his car start and pull away. I slept 6 hours. When I woke up, I opened my laptop and canceled the wedding venue. For $200. Non-refundable. I didn't argue. I called the caterer, the florist, the officiant, the print shop that had been 3 weeks away from finishing our invitations. Done by 9 in the morning. Then I called a locksmith, changed my alarm code, and removed my best friend's name from my building's emergency contact form. My mother called at 9:30. He phoned us last night, she said. She sounded like she hadn't slept. He told us what happened. Okay. Are you all right? I canceled the wedding. I'm changing the locks today. She was quiet for a moment. He was barely able to speak. He loves you, you know. Whatever he did. That part is true. I know you mean that kindly, I said. I have to go. She called back 3 times. I let each one go to voicemail. Here is what I understood. Even in those first days, there had been signs, a few canceled plans at the last minute when both my fiancée and I had been free. A comment she'd made once about how she and he had hung out while I was on site, which I'd taken at face value, because why wouldn't I? The way their conversation sometimes went quiet when I walked into a room, I'd filed all of it under nothing, because the idea had been so completely impossible, that my brain had simply refused to hold it. That's not a comfort. I'm not telling you that so you'll feel sorry for me. I'm telling you because the question I got asked later. How did you not see it? Deserves an honest answer. I didn't see it because I trusted them both completely. And that trust was the thing they used. The weeks after were strange in their ordinariness. I went back to work. I flew to Calgary for a highway interchange project. I went to the gym, cooked for one, watched hockey night in Canada on Fridays, and slept fine. The anger I'd expected never really arrived. What came instead was a kind of clarity. Everything became very simple, very legible, very clean. He left a handwritten card in my mailbox. I dropped it in the blue bin without opening it. My mother texted about Thanksgiving. Big dinner this year. Your aunt is driving up from Hamilton, please come. I texted back, is he coming? She took 40 minutes to reply. He might drop by for a bit. I set my phone down. I didn't go. My father called the next day. He said he understood why I was angry, said what happened was wrong, said all the right things, and then said, but he's been like a son to us. You have to understand that this isn't easy for our side either. I understand, I said. We're not choosing sides. I know you're not. I meant it without any warmth. They weren't choosing sides. They were just telling me that what he'd done was something they needed to hold gently, which meant they weren't completely in mine. I logged that information and filed it away. In early December, my father came to my apartment, sat at my kitchen table and talked for 20 minutes. He brought up the blizzard on the 401. He brought up 6 hours in a hospital waiting room reading magazines from 2011. All the things that were real and true. All of that happened, I agreed, and then he slept with my fiancée in my bed. My father looked at his hands, and had nothing to say to that. Will he be at Christmas dinner? I asked. A pause. He's family to us. That's not what I asked. Yes. He'll be there. Then I won't. On Christmas Eve I drove to my parents' house at 6 o'clock. On time as promised. My mother opened the door and held on too long and too hard. My father shook my hand. My sister was in the living room and gave me a tight hug. and searched my face for something she couldn't quite name. He was in the armchair by the fireplace. My father's chair, always his chair when he visited. He was wearing a sweater I'd given him 2 Christmases ago. He looked terrible, thinner. Something had gone slack in his face that hadn't been slack before. He stood up when I walked in. Hey, careful voice, like stepping onto ice he wasn't sure of. I walked past him to the kitchen and poured myself a glass of water. Dinner was my mother's best effort. Prime rib, roasted potatoes, Brussels sprouts with bacon. Her cranberry sauce made from scratch. She'd set the table beautifully. I ate everything that was put in front of me and talked to my sister about her job and to my father about the Leafs, which is a conversation that never ends well for anyone, but we keep having it. I answered questions about the Calgary project and about the trip to Iceland I'd taken. In November, I did not once speak to or about him. He tried twice. The first time he said my name during a pause in the conversation. I reached across the table and asked my sister to pass the gravy. The second time, in a quiet moment between courses, he said, I know this is uncomfortable for everyone. I know you didn't want me here. But I need you to know that I'm genuinely. I turned to my mother. The prime rib is perfect. Did you change the temperature this year? She looked at me for a long moment. Same as always. It's really good, I said. He sat back. My sister was staring at her plate. My father's jaw had gone tight. My mother refilled her wine. After dinner, I put my coat on. It's 8:30, my mother said. I know. Thank you for dinner, it was really good. My father stepped forward. You drove all the way here to say nothing to him, and leave before 9. You asked me to come to Christmas dinner. I came to Christmas dinner. That's not what we meant, and you know it. Then you should have said what you meant. My sister stood up from the couch. This isn't fair to any of us. You sat at that table for 2 hours and gave him nothing. Not even acknowledgement that he's a human being in the room. I didn't say a single word to him, I agreed. That's correct. He got to his feet. He looked hollowed out, like something essential had been removed. Please, he said. One word, tell me you hate me. Tell me I'm dead to you. Just say something. The silence is worse than anything. I looked at him. I really looked, the face I'd known since we were both 18 years old. The person I'd trusted more than almost anyone on this earth. I held that look for 5 full seconds. Then I picked up my scarf, opened the front door, and walked out. My phone was ringing before I reached my car. I drove home in the dark with 19 missed calls, stacking up and didn't play a single voicemail. I got home and read through the texts in order. My father, you humiliated him in front of the whole family. My sister, I don't recognize you right now. I genuinely don't. My mother, please come back. We can fix this together. Please. Him, I know I deserve this. I know. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I turned my phone face down, made myself tea and went to bed. Over the following 2 weeks I blocked my parents, my sister, the cousins who texted asking what had happened at dinner. I deleted the family group chat. I didn't block him. Not yet. I still wanted him to see those read receipts turn red every morning. I wanted him to understand that I was choosing, actively every single time, not to respond. Then I blocked him too. February brought a promotion. Regional project lead, 3 smites, responsibility, a raise that I spent on nothing in particular. I started running mornings along the waterfront. I booked a trip to Iceland and hiked Fimmvörðuháls in March in wind. Zoo so cold it felt like a physical thing pressing against you. I came home feeling lighter than I had in years. In April I met a woman at a professional mixer downtown. Structural engineer, with a firm that contracted with ours on bridge projects. She was funny and direct and didn't laugh at things she didn't actually find funny, which I appreciated more than I could immediately articulate. We talked for 3 hours. When the event wound down she handed me her card and said, completely straight-faced, I assume you know what to do with that. I did. In June an email came through my work account from an address I didn't recognize. New account, clearly made for the purpose. My sister, subject, please read this. I know you might not. I read it. He'd lost his position at the firm. Couldn't perform. Missing deadlines. Showing up to client meetings unprepared. Unable to focus. After everything had collapsed, he'd become fixated on my former fiancée, convinced himself that if they were together it would give what they'd done some meaning, some weight, something beyond what it actually was. He showed up at her apartment repeatedly, called constantly. She had filed for a peace bond through the Ontario courts. My parents were in couples counseling. They'd spent months arguing about whose decision it had been to invite him to Christmas, whether they'd driven me further away by doing it, what they should have done differently. My sister barely spoke to my father. She'd sided with him at the time and now she didn't. I understand now what we were asking of you. She wrote, at the end. We thought we were holding the family together. We were actually just making it more comfortable for ourselves. I'm sorry. I love you. I read it twice, sat with it for a while. Then I flagged the email, created a filter for that address, and went to bed. I thought about him that night. For the first time in months. Not with anger. I was well past anger. Or maybe anger had never really been the primary thing. I thought about him standing outside my door at 2 a.m. with his hands shaking. I thought about him showing up at her apartment over and over, trying to build something out of wreckage, trying to make what he'd done add up to more than what it was. I thought about my mother setting his place at the table for 11 years. About my father shaking his hand when I wasn't in the room. Yeah. About the way they'd stood in my kitchen and called what he did a mistake, a lapse. Something that happened. I understood it. I even had some feeling for it. They'd watched someone they loved like a son destroy everything. And there was no version of that which wasn't painful. I understood it completely. But understanding a thing, and accepting what it costs you, are entirely different matters. A month later, on a warm Saturday evening, I walked from Harborfront to the Distillery District. And back with the woman I'd met in April. 12 kilometers, easy pace, the kind of conversation that doesn't need filling. We stopped at a bakery on King Street and I made her try a butter tart. She said it was far too sweet. I told her that was the entire point. We argued about it for 20 minutes. And it was one of the best conversations I'd had in years. My phone buzzed on the walk back. Unknown number, voicemail. I listened when I got home. My mother, using a number I hadn't blocked yet. Her voice was steady in the way it gets when she's rehearsed. She missed me. My father missed me. She wasn't asking for anything. The door was open whenever I was ready. I listened to the whole message. Then I texted the woman I'd been spending time with, good walk. Same time next week? She replied in under a minute. Only if you admit I was right about the butter tarts. I set my phone on the counter and stood in my kitchen alone for a moment. The apartment was quiet. Outside, the city was doing what cities do. Everything was exactly as it should be. Here is what I know now, as clearly as I know anything. The people who are supposed to protect you will sometimes choose not to. They'll call it love. They'll call it keeping the peace, keeping the family together, not wanting to lose anyone. They'll mean all of it sincerely and still, in the end, ask you to absorb your own pain so that everyone else can remain comfortable. That is a choice. Every single part of it is a choice. I chose differently. I chose the version of my life where I didn't have to sit across the table from the person who'd betrayed me. And be grateful for a snowstorm he'd driven through 11 years ago. I walked out into that evening, and I did not look back. Not once, not ever.